6 minutes into a conversation with air traffic control, 20-year-old pilot Frederick Valentich reported that a large, unidentified object was hovering over him. His final transmission was interrupted by 17 seconds of a harsh, metallic scraping sound. Then the line went quiet. In the hours and days that followed, search teams scoured the ocean. They found no wreckage, no oil slick, and no body. Valentich operated out of Moorabbin, a busy general aviation airfield on the edge of Melbourne. He had logged about 150 hours in the air, enough to hold a night rating, but still a relatively inexperienced pilot. He was flying a single-engine Cessna 182, heavily fueled for what should have been a short jump south from the mainland, across Bass Strait to King Island. The environment that evening offered no warning signs. The sky was perfectly clear, visibility was excellent, and the water below was calm. The public record of Australia's most famous UFO abduction exists as a set of radio logs, a sequence of events that must be weighed against the mechanical limits of the cockpit and the unforgiving physics of flight. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Valentich reported his first major landmark right on schedule, the Cape Otway Lighthouse. From here, he left the glowing coastline behind and flew out over open water. 6 minutes later, he radioed Melbourne Flight Service. He asked if there was any known traffic below his altitude, reporting a large aircraft lit by 4 bright landing lights darting around his plane. This diagram illustrates a physiological trap known as spatial disorientation. When a pilot flies at night over pitch-black water without a visible horizon, the human inner ear begins to send false positional signals to the brain. If the pilot slowly drops a wing, they can enter a tightening, descending turn known as a graveyard spiral. The inner ear adapts to the steady motion, making the pilot believe they are flying perfectly level, even as they accelerate toward the ocean. In a steep, spiraling turn, the geometry of the aircraft's own navigation lights, spread across the wingtips and tail, changes relative to the surface. Over calm, dark water, these create a cluster of moving reflections that can appear to mimic the aircraft's every maneuver, effectively playing games with a pilot who no longer knows which way is up. Human perception evolved for the ground. Placed above an endless black ocean, those senses can easily break down, transforming a pilot's own movements into an impossible phantom pursuer. As Valentich described the object orbiting above him, the audio recording picked up a new problem. His engine began to cough and run rough. This flowchart outlines standard aviation emergency protocols. Faced with an engine failure, a pilot is trained to pitch for best glide speed, switch fuel tanks, declare a formal mayday, and prepare to ditch the aircraft. The radio transcript reveals that Valentich ignored these steps. Completely fixated on the lights outside his window, he focused entirely on describing the object instead of running his emergency checklists. Over the years, a popular public myth emerged that a UFO forced Valentich to fly completely upside down for several minutes. This cross-section of a Cessna 182 illustrates a gravity-feed fuel system. The fuel sits in the wings and pulls downward into the engine block. If the aircraft rolls inverted, the fuel pools at the top of the tanks. This immediately severs the supply line to the engine, meaning a Cessna 182 cannot physically run upside down for more than a few seconds before stalling. The intersection of a failing engine and failing sense of balance created a lethal feedback loop. Without a clear horizon to stabilize his perspective, the pilot's focus remained outside the cockpit, even as the mechanical systems required for survival began to collapse. A massive search operation launched almost immediately. Military helicopters, civilian planes, and ships covered thousands of square miles of ocean, looking for a life jacket, an emergency radio beacon, or any floating debris. They found exactly 0 traces. 5 years later, beachcombers on Flinders Island, far to the east of the flight path, discovered a weathered engine cowl flap washed up on the rocks. Investigators confirmed the part came from a Cessna 182, and the serial numbers matched a range that included Valentich's plane. But several other identical planes had crashed in the exact same region over the years. The debris could not be definitively tied to his aircraft. With no physical evidence to examine, investigators were forced to close the case as presumed fatal. That lack of a conclusive ending left an information vacuum that the public imagination rushed to fill. Grounded theories surfaced, including the idea that Valentich staged his own disappearance. He carried hours of extra fuel, but his family noted he had no debts, no crisis, and zero motive to vanish. Instead, the public latched on to an explosive wave of local UFO sightings that spring. This chart compares the volume of regional UFO sightings against the timeline of October and November 1978. When we overlay the publication dates of newspaper stories covering the disappearance, a clear pattern emerges. The vast majority of people reporting strange green lights and darting crafts only did so after the story hit the newsstands. This is a textbook example of reporting bias. A compelling media narrative plants an idea in the public consciousness, which then retroactively generates a massive wave of false data points. The aviation physics, the engine mechanics, and the sociological data strongly suggest a disoriented pilot spiraling into a dark sea. But until the ocean gives back a piece of undeniable proof, the fate of Frederick Valentich remains an open question.